Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Monday, August 10th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi, and we begin with fast action at the White House late this afternoon. The Secret Service rushing to remove President Trump from his briefing after shots were fired near the White House.
Soon. Excuse me?
What's going on, Mr. President? And the president returned minutes later saying the shooting was under control and that a suspect was taken to the hospital. Reports say 2 gunshots were heard about a block away. No motive yet. Asked if he was shaken by the incident, Trump responded, "I don't know. Do I seem rattled?" More on that briefing and the president's executive order on COVID-19 relief in just a few minutes. While the San Diego Unified School District will start its school year online, officials are ready to reopen campuses once they get the green light. KPBS education reporter Joe Hong has the details on what returning to the classroom could look like for students.
The San Diego Unified School District today released a 60-page report detailing safety measures for when it reopens campuses. The report was written in collaboration with 10 health experts from UC San Diego. The guidelines, however, are subject to change depending on the status of the pandemic in the coming weeks or months.
Whatever our experts say today, it may change in 3 weeks.
Howard Terrace was one of those researchers and is also the head pediatrician at San Diego Unified. He said once San Diego County is off the state's monitoring list for high infection rates, the district will make its own assessment of whether it's safe to have students and teachers back in the classroom.
And that includes not only how prevalent the disease is out there, but also where is our public health system in getting testing and getting contact tracing? Where are they in that process everywhere? Because that will also apply to our schools.
The plan to reopen schools includes requirements for social distancing, face coverings, and classroom ventilation. Students will be required to be 6 feet apart at all times unless there's a barrier between desks. And students will wear masks at all times in class. Windows will remain open during bus rides, and if it's feasible, classes could be held outside.
We really have to check and make sure that the ventilation is very good, and that if we are using an HVAC, an air conditioning or heating system, that our filters are really very good. And we're going to be looking at those sorts of things. As much as can be done outside will be done outside, because there's the best ventilation possible.
Also, the report says classroom surfaces and play equipment will be sanitized at least once a day. Joe Hong, KPBS News.
The first day of school is usually wrought in excitement, anticipation, even a little chaos. But at El Cajon Valley High today, the excitement was mostly online. The campus wasn't entirely empty, though. Some students dropped by to pick up supplies. Office and administrative staff are on campus, making sure online learning is working smoothly, and the campus is ready to reopen once given permission. Superintendent Teresa Kemper says there is a 5-level plan in place to gradually bring kids back into the classroom once California is off the state watch list.
3 days to get off the watch list, and then 14 days after that schools can open. So we have the potential any day of schools opening in 17 days.
Teachers are mostly teaching from home, but have been encouraged to use their classrooms. As parents around the country prepare for the beginning of the school year, alarming new numbers. A new report shows more than 97,000 children tested positive for coronavirus in the last 2 weeks of July. Camila Bernal has a look at the increase in child cases.
The U.S. has now surpassed 5 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. And in the last 2 weeks of July, nearly 100,000 of those cases were attributed to children.
Good afternoon, teachers and students.
As more schools prepare to open, some are worried.
I have heard the words from educators scared to death multiple times over the past month or so.
The American Academy of Pediatrics and the Children's Hospital Association studied the child cases, and in the last 2 weeks of July, say there was a 40% increase in child infections across the states and cities that were studied.
If we don't have the ability to socially distance, they are not safe. If we don't have masks and protective equipment, they are not safe.
In Georgia, this photo went viral.
I was very concerned for everyone in that building and everyone in our county because this is obviously nowhere near safe.
Then the high school reported 9 COVID-19 cases. 6 were students, 3 were staff members. The school now turning to temporary virtual learning.
I just am very hopeful that we can take more precautions going from work and school and everything of the sorts.
Children are less likely to die, but they do carry and transmit the virus. Camila Bernal, KPBS News.
San Diego County will have to do better in order to reopen schools. The county is still above the state's trigger level for community outbreaks of coronavirus. Today, 5 new outbreaks were confirmed, including 1 each in a restaurant bar, a business, a grocery, and a government setting. There have been 24 outbreaks in the past 7 days. 228 new cases were also reported today and no additional deaths. President Trump is sparking new confusion over additional unemployment benefits. He now says some states may not be required to pay part of the benefits if the governors request federal help. Lauren Fox has more.
With negotiations for a new stimulus package at a standstill on Capitol Hill, President Trump tried to sidestep Congress and take coronavirus relief into his own hands, signing executive orders.
I think it actually works better if we do it the way we're doing it. You can't beat the deal we made.
But the president's move does not provide a clear path to help millions of Americans out of work.
My constitutional advisors tell me they're absurdly unconstitutional.
Unfortunately, the president's executive orders, described in one word, could be paltry.
Part of Trump's memorandum reducing the additional unemployment benefit from $600 to $400 per week, leaving it to states to pitch in $100 for every resident enrolled. By Sunday, the president said it's possible the federal government could pick up the whole tab if a governor requests it.
It'll depend on the state, and they'll make an application. We'll look at it and we'll make a decision. So it may be they'll pay nothing in some instances.
Earlier, President Trump's economic advisor said states could afford it.
I think they'll be able to make room. So based on our estimates, the states will be able to provide the extra $100.
But for states with budgets already stretched thin by the pandemic...
Look, that would cost us about $500 million between now and the end of the year. I could take that money from testing. I don't think that's a great idea.
And in another executive order, the president said...
So I'm protecting people from eviction.
In reality, Trump's executive order does not explicitly provide help for homeowners and renters. The president also promised to suspend payroll taxes. That's money paid into Social Security and Medicare.
If I'm victorious on November 3rd, I plan to forgive these taxes and make permanent cuts to the payroll tax.
Trump's plan is actually a deferral, and only Congress has the power to change tax law. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer are looking to meet yet again with White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin to try to work out a deal.
We've said let's pass legislation on the things we agree on and knock these off one at a time, and they've refused to do that.
We're at stalemate because the Republicans have, from the start, never understood the gravity of the situation that we are in. The problem has grown, and it has become an enormous economic problem.
That was Lauren Fox reporting. Today, Governor Gavin Newsom said the president's executive order would cost California $700 million per week. He says the state can't afford it.
State does not have an identified resource of $700 million per week that we haven't already obliged. There is no money sitting in the piggy bank of the previous CARES Act to be reprioritized or reconstituted for this purpose. Simply does not exist. Period of time we've spent time.
Newsom says money from the last CARES Act has already been allocated to schools and healthcare for the pandemic response. He says federal government needs to front California the money to pay for added unemployment benefits. Changes are coming to the California Department of Public Health. Dr. Sonia Angel resigned as director and state public health officer, but did not explain why. On Friday, state officials announced they had fixed a glitch causing a lag in coronavirus test information. And today, the state says it has cleared the backlog of up to 300,000 results, which will be filtered to counties over the next few days. 2 people will fill Angel's previous roles. Help continues to pour in for businesses damaged during the La Mesa protests. KPBS reporter Tanya Thorne has the story.
On the night of the looting, many local businesses here saw all the damages happening through their own security devices, but couldn't do anything.
We had glass everywhere throughout the store. We spent all weekend cleaning everything up.
Many business owners like Steve Clay in the La Mesa Springs Shopping Center
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
had their stores broken into and looted when violence broke out after peaceful protests over the death of George Floyd.
And people could not believe what happened to us.
Members of the community came out the very next day to clean up the broken glass, put up plywood, and set up GoFundMe accounts that have kept businesses like Clay's running.
$2.50, son.
The outpouring of donations led to the creation of the La Mesa Disaster Recovery Fund. More than $260,000 came in from over 2,000 donors.
We had like probably $14,000 worth of damage, and it'll help pay for carpet and things that were just destroyed, the things that are missing, and that's what it's all there for. And it helps these businesses because some of these businesses are not opening back up.
Relief checks are expected to arrive tomorrow, the 11th, which will definitely help many of these businesses. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Today, San Diego County held its first of 2 virtual public hearings on the county's $6.4 billion budget. COVID-19 is the top budgetary priority, with $100 million for a testing, tracing, and treatment strategy. Today, several residents who called in to comment asked supervisors to consider defunding the Sheriff's Department and increasing rental assistance. The next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. County supervisors will vote formally on adopting the budget on August 25th. The numbers are in, and due to park closures, SeaWorld is seeing a dramatic drop in revenue. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman details what the losses could mean for SeaWorld San Diego, which hasn't been open for months.
SeaWorld San Diego's parent company is reporting revenue down around 95% this quarter compared to last year, due in part to COVID-19 closures. Numbers-wise, just $18 million was brought in during the second quarter this year compared to more than $400 million last year.
They've been really kind of turning it around before the pandemic with the opening of the various roller coasters and the big one that was scheduled to open this summer.
Driving up to the theme park near Mission Bay today, there are closed signs posted outside. Due to the pandemic, SeaWorld San Diego has been shuttered since mid-March.
We don't know how long this is going to last for theme parks because this is the last big bastion of large crowds coming together all in one place.
To help navigate uncertain months ahead, SeaWorld Entertainment has been busy raising some $700 million. Recently, some of SeaWorld's dozen parks across the country reopened, and while attendance is low, guests are still spending money inside.
Has stayed remarkably consistent this year. Which is actually good news for SeaWorld.
San Diego State Marketing Lecturer Miro Kopik says if SeaWorld can successfully reopen its other parks, San Diego should be a smooth transition once officials get the green light here.
They've been able to open safely elsewhere so they can open safely here.
SeaWorld has been working with local and state officials to get the park open for months. The pandemic has forced many companies to completely rethink the way they do business to stay alive. But Kopik says SeaWorld opting to wait it out could pay off.
One thing you don't want to do is really tarnish your brand and people say this is lame, and then that can impact future expectation and attendance.
Even though the closure of SeaWorld San Diego is now months long, Kopik says don't expect the company to be suffering long term.
But I don't think it's going to hurt the brand. They've been around for a very, very long time, 50 years, and they are going to at least be here to stay. And certainly the parent company has enough cash on hand to ensure their survival for the next year plus.
The San Diego Zoo, which brings in millions of visitors a year, has already reopened here. Today, we asked officials when the same could be allowed for theme parks like SeaWorld. In a statement, the State Department of Public Health says theme parks pose a high risk for virus transmission, which is already elevated in our state. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Now for some major college football news. The Aztecs and the Mountain West Conference appear to be punting on the fall season. This decision comes after the Big Ten is reportedly set to make a formal announcement tomorrow. Officials in all leagues have been trying to figure out how to deal with the pandemic and keep students and faculty safe. It's not known whether a spring season is actually possible. It is believed other conferences are likely to follow, including the Pac-12. 40 local organizations are banding together to build local support for a Green New Deal. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson says the ongoing COVID pandemic is shining a light on a number of social justice issues.
The coalition is varied and yet unified. It features support from local politicians and a host of social justice, economic equity, and environmental groups. All talked about the way COVID-19 has exposed the injustices felt in poor communities. Malika Marston works with the San Diego Climate Action Campaign. She says social injustices are all rooted in the same system of exploitation.
This has been made clear watching the global pandemic devastate the health and livelihoods of those already suffering the most from systemic racism, economic inequality, and environmental injustice.
Marston is urging the groups to endorse a zero carbon goal for San Diego and a regional transportation plan that does the same. Zero carbon means only releasing as much carbon as a city or county can absorb. San Diego County Supervisor Nathan Fletcher says the issue is no longer just about social inequities.
We know the climate crisis is a global problem with local impacts, which is why we need local leadership. Right now, COVID is impacting working class communities of color, the same communities on the front lines of the climate crisis, the same communities that suffer from exploitive jobs and income inequality.
The groups hope to begin working on climate-friendly and socially responsible local policies, so the region will be ready when federal officials adopt some of the aspirations in the National Green New Deal plan. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Our dry weather continues, and temperatures will be slowly rising this week, and it's getting hot here in the interior late in the week and into the weekend. Looks like a heat wave is on the way. For the next couple mornings, we'll still have our night and morning low clouds, but with time, the marine layer will continue to shrink, so we'll see less and less of that. Temperatures slowly warming through the midweek, and then temperatures really hot inland sections later this week and into the weekend. And with that, heat on the increase, our excessive heat watches out for parts of Southern California. And as we take a look at our temperatures for tonight, we'll dip down the upper 50s in Oceanside, San Diego, 65. Some clouds rolling in, some areas of fog as well. And there you can see temperatures in Ramona tonight at 53, El Cajon, 63, Borrego Springs at 77. For the next couple of days, well, no real big changes here. High pressure is going to start to build back into our area later in the week, so that's why temperatures will start to rise, especially in the inland sections, but even the coast will get warmer too. Oceanside 78, San Diego 76 for tomorrow. Borrego Springs 110 and Campo at 96. And as we take a look at Wednesday, it's still dry. We may see some high clouds in our area, but no precipitation is expected. So as we go to our extended forecast for you, temperature is warming up right to the coast here. Look at that at the end of the week. It's going to be very warm here with lots of sunshine. As we head to the inland sections, it's getting hot here. Look at that. Friday, forecast high up to 100 degrees. Mountain sections warming up. Temperatures in the mid-80s, plenty of sunshine, some high clouds around. And in the deserts, we could see near record heat here on Friday. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
A victory for California's lawsuit against Uber and Lyft. A judge ordered the ride-hailing companies to treat their drivers as employees instead of independent contractors. The judge delayed enforcing his order to give Uber and Lyft time to appeal. They are accused of violating a state law requiring companies to classify workers as employees if they controlled how workers did their jobs or the work was part of their normal business. Our partners at iNewsSource reported last week that San Diego may have been overcharging property owners thousands of dollars for granny flat permit fees. Now, since that story aired, the city attorney's office has issued an opinion saying the two departments that oversee these permits should review them to determine if anyone was charged too much. The departments plan to review only permits issued this year. For more on this story, go to inewssource.org. It's the world's most popular shoe, and unfortunately far too many flip-flops end up in the ocean, on beaches, and in landfills. But faculty and student researchers at UC San Diego have come up with a solution. KPBS reporter John Carroll shows us how they're taking algae and turning it into biodegradable footwear.
We began with a surfboard.
UC San Diego chemistry professor Michael Burkhart is in a greenhouse on the UCSD campus talking about a journey that began in 2008 when he and his students started making gasoline from algae. But once it became clear big oil wasn't about to tolerate fuel from algae replacing fossil fuels, they went in a different direction. They started making polyurethanes from algae. That led to the surfboard, and once word got out about that, Burkhart says the phone started ringing.
From just about anybody that uses polyurethane, from shoe companies to companies that make yoga mats to companies that make pool noodles. And they all asked us, can you make renewable polyurethanes? And we said yes.
The process of turning algae into renewable polyurethanes starts with making cultures in a lab. Then they're brought here to grow in these things called raceway ponds.
We'll grow these up until they get nice and dense. At which point then we will separate the algae from the water.
That yields this green goop. The process then moves back to the lab where a lot of very scientific mixing and measuring goes on until what was green goop is transformed into polyurethanes and eventually poured into these forms. The whole idea is to move away from plastics made from fossil fuels that can take up to 1,000 years to decompose.
We really only want to be making materials that have the ability to decompose and or can be recycled.
After all the algae cultivation and all the work done here in the lab, it all comes down to this. The sole for a flip-flop, an environmentally friendly flip-flop. A flip-flop that, depending on where it's discarded, can completely degrade in just 16 weeks. The scientists working on this have formed a company that's working with a local manufacturer to bring the flip-flops to market. That should happen sometime next year. One small step to help rid the earth of non-biodegradable plastics, or call it a giant stride towards saving the planet. John Carroll, KPBS News.
What if doing just a few simple things would be enough to stop the coronavirus pandemic in its tracks? Well, Mandy Gaither tells us 3 steps that everyone can take to help.
Please wear a mask.
Social distancing is absolutely critical.
Continue to practice good hygiene, wash your hands.
You've heard these things over and over, and according to a new study, these steps won't just help coronavirus from spreading, but could pretty much prevent any future outbreaks. The study published in the journal PLOS Medicine says that in order for that to happen, 90% of a population has to adopt these behaviors. Even if the public is slow to do this, it will not delay a peak in cases, but at least reduce the number. The research is based on the interaction of people in the Netherlands, but those behind the study say it can be applied to other countries. Researchers say governments need to continue to drive home how easily coronavirus spreads.
These are our instruments of freedom because they will give us the freedom to open and to stay open and to be able to protect those who we love.
For today's Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump signs orders to offer help, but a failure to strike a deal with Congress leaves many questions. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
And here's a recap of today's top stories. San Diego Unified School District says it's ready to reopen campuses as soon as it's safe to do so. While the school year will start online, today the district released a report detailing safety measures. It requires social distancing, face coverings, and classroom ventilation. Classroom surfaces and play equipment will be sanitized daily. Governor Newsom says President Trump's executive order would cost California $700 million a week. The order asks states to cover 25% of an extra $400 per week in unemployment benefits. Newsom says that's money the state simply doesn't have. He says the federal government needs to front California those dollars. And San Diego County is still above the state's trigger level for community outbreaks of coronavirus. Today, 5 new outbreaks were confirmed, including one in a restaurant bar, a business, a grocery, and a government setting. 228 new cases were also reported today, and no additional deaths. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley. And by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.